Okay, we are on Nun Amud Aleph, about 15 lines up from the bottom. The first word is Ashkache. In the article, it's 50A3. The left column, the third paragraph, starts. The Gemara relates an incident that involves this ruling. So let's just read that ruling again. Rabbi Yosef Rechanina, Ba'usha Iskinu Ha'isha Shemarcha Benichse Melug B'chai Ba'ala Umeisa Haba'al Umeisa Haba'al Mot V'yada Lakuchos. So a woman who sold her Nichse Melug, so Nichse Melug are the properties, so it's real estate fields that she brought into the marriage, and the husband could and so they generate some income, so the husband can use that income that gets generated, but he's not allowed to touch the principal. And then she died, and let's say she had sold the field, but because it was written in the Kesuva that he had the rights to the profits from the field, there had to be some arrangement that the sellers had to, give up some of the what's it called, the income that it would generate. Let's say it generated $100 a year. So I would assume that if she would have sold the fields, she had to have some type of a condition in there that they have to pay $100 a year to her husband. Meaning, since it's in the Kesuva, he has to keep getting it, or somehow she'd have to pay him otherwise. You look a little confused.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. When you sell a piece of property, you sell a piece of property.
Right, but because it was written in the Kesuva that she was bringing this certain type of property called Nichse Malug into the wedding, she has a response. I assume that because it's in a contract, she has to keep providing that income to him. She died.
She died. So, okay, so she died.
I mean, whether this is in the Gemara or in reality nowadays, nobody sells property.
It does have. I'll tell you a case that's not so uncommon, and it happened to a relative of your wife, that someone, let's say they were contingent. They were selling their house now because they were going to buy another house, but the new house wasn't ready. So sometimes the sale goes through, and then they have to rent it from the new buyer, and the buyer can't take ownership right away. So then we have to say, so either this is something like that. Maybe it's an option, a futures option, maybe that she's selling her right, that when maybe she doesn't sell it now. Maybe she sells it now that it takes effect when she dies, the field gets sold. But because it's in the Kesuva, she can't take that money away from him because she promised to him. So maybe it's
that's a different contingency, though.
It's a different contingency, but there's some type of
not an income generating.
Right. That's not an
Never heard of anything like that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, but you can make a contract for whatever you want. So, meaning, let me tell you how an example where it could happen. Let's say that they made improvements. The buyers made improvements. So let's say it's now generating $150 a year. So they keep the 50 and the husband gets the 100. But because it was in the Kesuva, she can't take that away from him, but she sold it somehow. Obviously, he didn't have any rights to it, so he couldn't stop it. But it says, the husband is allowed to take it back from the Lakuchos. Obviously, he would have to pay them back for the money that they spent. But basically, it says he has some type of, it's not a lien, but first right. So Rashi says that the Chachamim considered that the husband himself is a lokeach also, and he has first rights. It seems. So there's other halachas. Let's say there's a halacha called bar metzra. Bar metzra, a meitzar is, well, in Tehillim we say, mina meitzar karosika. From the depths I call out. But besides for meitzar being a depth, a meitzar is kind of like a boundary. So, or bein hamitzarim, the 3 weeks are bein hamitzarim, between the narrows. But a meitzar could be, so the narrows represents, there's 2 fences on either side of you, and you're going through a narrow alley. So a meitzar is a boundary. So there's halachos that if a neighbor who has a field next to your field and you want to sell your field, you have to give them the first right to buy the field. So in halacha, there are certain cases where certain people have first dibs on buying something if you want to sell it. They can't make you sell it against your will, but if you're going to sell it, you have to let them buy it first. If you sold it to someone else, they can say, hey, I wanted to buy that. They'll pay the person who bought it. The person who bought it has to sell it to them, and that person who had bought it has to find a different field to buy. So there are halachos where certain people have precedence, they have first right to purchase something. So the husband, it seems, would have the first right to purchase the field that he never owned, but it was the nichse malud.
But this halacha, that when neighbor has
Yeah.
like primary right.
Uh-huh.
I think it's applicable only if the price is the same. If you offer the same price.
Yeah. So
If I'm not mistaken. If somebody buy it for this amount, and they say, no, I'm gonna buy it because I have a neighbor, but I'm gonna pay you 10% less.
No. They would. I think they'd have to say pay the regular right. They don't get a discount on it, but they have first right. So Ashkeche Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Rav Abo to have a koiba uchlusa de usha. So Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef found Rav Abo, who was with the people of Usha. Amar le manmar deshmaitza de Usha. Who is the one who's taught this statement of Usha? Amar le Rav Yosef Bar Chanina. They said it was Rav Yosef Bar Chanina. Tanamine Arban Zimni v'damli kamad manchal bekise. So he learned it from him 40 times, or he reviewed it from him 40 times, and it's like it was someone who would put it in his pockets. I think maybe we did this last week, and that was, but did we talk about this? So this is a halacha that about reviewing, about chazara, the importance of chazara. So he reviewed it 40 times to make sure he didn't forget. There's a different Gemara, I think, in Chagiga that it's not similar. The person who reviews it 100 times, it's the same level of understanding of someone who reviews something 101 times. So the more you review, the more you understand it. And sometimes when you understand it, you realize the less you understand it. But that's a bigger level of understanding. Lahavdil, when Rumsfeld said there's known knowns and known unknowns, when you learn a Gemara more often, you sometimes you say, well, this part doesn't make sense. And then you look it up and you see the Rishonim ask that question. So Ramosha is mentioned at times. He says, when you heard a share from my father at the end, you say you knew so much from the Gemara. But when you learned from Rav Yashaber, from Rav Aaron's brother, at the end of the sugya, you knew this didn't make sense, and this didn't make sense, and that didn't make sense. But what was the difference? I mean, the difference, it's more of a glass half empty or glass half full. When Rav Aaron was done filled with share, we understand this, we understand this, we understand that, we're happy. When Rav Yashaber gave share, the stuff that he couldn't figure out, he said at the end of this, he made it known, we still don't understand this. So you had a feeling going on that a pit in your heart, a hollow in your heart that you didn't understand this. And it could be, when Ramosha said, he said maybe it was because when his uncle learned from his father, from their father, Ramosha, when he was younger, and what Rav Aaron learned from him at his last few years of his, until the end of his life. So maybe he had a different perspective earlier. But Rav Yashaber also said when he was a little kid, so it was well before Rav Aaron was born, even or before Rav Aaron was born, Rav Yashaber said that he's told his mother, that Tati said that the Rambam is shver. We don't know the answer for the Rambam. So then his mother said to him, maybe when you grow up, you'll find an answer for the Rambam. That's it might have been, I don't know if that's in Rabbi Rakefet's book, but there is that is said over that even in those cases there was known when Rav Moshe's grandfather Rav Moshe couldn't figure out the Rambam at the end. When Rav Yashaber was a little boy, he knew that there was something was missing. So maybe that stayed with him. But I could say that when I was in Rav Ilson's share, and Rav Ilson was a close talmid of Rav Yashaber, there were sugyas. At the end of the sugya, he would say, we don't understand this, we don't know this, and we don't know this. So I guess he got that from Rav Yashaber. But so here he learned it 40 times. So, and I think we mentioned that, did he mention the whole statement 40 times, or he knew the statement, but once he learned who the author was, he did. So maybe, and because why is it 40 and other times it wasn't 40? So maybe he knew the statement, but he repeated it saying that it was said in the name of Rav Yossi Bar Chanina. So meaning if you learn a new thing, you might have to learn 101 times. But halavai, we should learn it 10 times. But he already knew that, so he only reviewed it 40 times just to connect the Tana, the author, with the teaching. And so it's in his pocket. So a pocket is something that's with you, it's easily accessible. So would remember it enough. That as a drasha type thing, there's a Gemara that you can there's three things, and it's a play on words to tell what type of person someone is. Bekiso, bekaso, bekoso. In his anger, kaas is anger. Bekiso, in his pocket, does he give tzedakah or not? Bekaso, does he get angry? How does he act? Not Picasso, but Bekaso. And Bekiso and Bekoso with his drink. Does he drink a lot? When he drinks too much, how does he behave? So when they say what's in your wallet, you're not looking for capital one. You want to know that there's important what's important for you is what you keep in your pocket. And so this Memra was important, so he kept this statement near him. Ashrei Shomer Mishpat Osa Tzedakah B'Chol. So the pasuk in Mishlei, in Tehillim, praiseworthy are the ones who guard the law. Mishpat Osa Tzedakah B'Chol. They do tzedakah at every time. So, is it possible to do tzedakah at every time? Now, there's a different Gemara at the beginning of Sanhedrin. It's from a different pasuk, but it says that David did. Oh no, it's a little different. Never mind. He did Mishpat and Shalom. Never mind. Is it possible to tzedakah at every moment? Darsha Rabbeinu Sheb Yavne. Our teachers in Yavne taught. Amri la Rabbi Lazar. Some say it was Rabbi Eliezer. Zehazan banav of Nosaf Shem Kitanim. This is someone who feeds or provides food for his minor sons and daughters, even when he's not obligated to feed them. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar, and Shmuel Bar Nachmani said, "Zehem Megadol Yasam v'Yisoma b'Soch Beiso Umasian." This is someone who raised orphan and a girl orphan in his house, and then he marries them off. So when you're supporting people all the time, that's someone who's able to do. That's someone who does tzedakah all the time. Wealth and whatever, a lot of money and wealth are in his house, and his charity, his tzedakah, stands forever. That pasuk is also in Tehillim. Torah umalamda. This one says that this refers to someone who learns Torah and teaches it. So the fact so Rashi says the fact that he learns Torah, that's when the pasuk says he has riches and wealth in his house, that he learns Torah, and that it stands forever is because he teaches Torah to other people. He doesn't keep it for himself, but he teaches it over. Rashi says not just that he teaches, but shetarach, he did tircha. He went out of his way to teach. And the other one says this is someone who writes books of the Torah and the Nevi'im and the Kesuvim, and he lends them out for other people. So Rashi says the books themselves exist for him, and his tzedakah stays forever. And this is one of the Shira Maloses. You'll see children to your children, and it'll be Shalom, peace on Yisrael. Amrav Shoban Levi Kevin Shabanim Levanacha Shalom Yisrael. When you see you have grandchildren, there's going to be peace in Israel. That there's not going to be problems of Yibum and Chalitza. So, it's not exactly clear what this means. the pshat seems to be that if you don't have grandchildren from all your sons, there's going to be some arguments. Well, having to do yibum or chalitza, and some of the brothers may not want to do yibum, and then if there's chalitza, there might be hard feelings and this and that. The Rashba seems to mention something about it's more than that, but it's that the families are going to argue about Yerusha and which would get this plot and that plot, and if you don't have sons, it'll go to the daughter, and if you don't have children at all, it would go to a closer relative. So there seems to be a machlokas yishonim about this, because from in Parshas Maseh, when Benot Tzlavchad said our father didn't have any sons, so what's going to happen to his Yerusha and Eretz Yisrael? So then the parsha came that if you don't have sons, it goes to the daughters. If there are no daughters, it goes to his brothers. And if his his nephews, and if he doesn't have any nephews, it'll go to his closest relative. So from the Torah, I don't know if there's a drashos about it, but from the Rishonim I saw, it seems that they don't like that explanation, because here, so it's the next answer actually. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Kemesh al Dainei Chodolasul Le'insuye. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says when your sons have sons, it's shalom on the judges of Israel that they don't have to argue. So Rashi says of who is the first for the Yerusha. So I think the Rashba doesn't like it. He says, well, it's clear when if you don't have sons, or if there aren't sons, there's clear halachas of who the Yerusha goes to. So what do the Dayanim have to argue about? What do they have to get involved to discuss? So the Rashba says something about that different people want different pieces of land or something. But when everyone has sons, it's clear that it's going to get divided up a certain way. So you're not going to have to go to Dayanim to clear things up. Here on the last line here of the Amud is that Midrash Darsh Rabbi Lazar b'Pnei Chachamim. So let's look at the Mishnah. What was in the Mishnah there? So Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah darshan, he expounded this following Joshin from the Chachamim and Karen B'Yavna. The sons get a Yerusha, the daughters have to get fed. This is about the clause in the Kesuva, that just like the sons only inherit after the father dies, the daughters only get fed after their father died. And that's what the Gemara we started out a couple weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, whatever, that the daughters don't necessarily, from the Ikra Din, don't have to be fed. There might have been a later takana that they do have to be fed, but the Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah's drasha was that the daughters didn't have to be fed. Yosef, so we're on the top of Nun Amud Beis. Yosef Rav Yosef Kamed Rav Hamnuna. Rav Yosef was sitting in front of Rav Hamnuna. But Yosef Rav Hamnuna v'Ka'amar Kevan Kishem Shein Habanim Yorshim Elamina Karka Kach Ein Habanos Nidonos Elamina Karka. And he said, just like sons only inherit real estate, the daughters only get fed from real estate. Avashalei Kuliyama, everyone was making noise against him. The Shavak Arahu Diarsile Benin, the Lo Shavak Aralo Yasrele Banim, only someone who has real estate, his sons are going to inherit it, and someone who doesn't have real estate, his sons aren't going to inherit it. That's not true. If he had real estate and movable properties, they all get split up. If he didn't have real estate and only movable properties, the sons that gets split up as his Yerusha. So what is he talking about? It's only real estate. We know that that's not true. So Amarle Rav Yosef says, Vidilma is Kesuvos banim dichrin kamar. Maybe master is talking about Kesuvos banim dichrin. So Amarle Rav Hamnuna said, Mar Gavarabahu Yadamai Kamina. Mar is a great man, he knows what I'm talking about. So there's a claim. So later on Daf Tzadi Aleph, the Gemara says here that if there was a clause written in the Kesuva called Kesuvos banim dichrin. Banim dichrin means male children, so they only collect from movable property. Excuse me, they only get this ksuvas banim different. This clause of the male children does not get collected from metaltalin. It only gets collected from real estate. So, for example, this is a case where someone was married to two wives, and the wives died, and then the husband died, and then there's two groups of kids from one mother and from the other mother. So they each want, the two groups of kids each want the ksuva from their mother. And for example, it could be a case where one of them had a big ksuva and one of them didn't, or even they both had the same amount in their ksuva, but maybe it's a case where one of the wives had a lot of children and one of them didn't have so many children. So the ones who had more children, each of them is getting a smaller portion, because let's say it's $100,000 being split 8 ways versus $100,000 being split 3 ways. Yeah, with at least 2 wives, right? That's what the case is. That's what Rashi says. Oh, no, we don't know about the ksuva. But also, but it probably didn't matter because at that time Yosef was supporting them all anyway. So I don't know. Oh, but actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I was looking through a certain sefer, a recent sefer, who talks about halachas and parsha, and he mentions in this week's parsha, because Yaakov says, my father was talking about it this morning after davening, but a different aspect. When Yaakov says that he'll aser asrenu lach, he's going to give a tenth, or actually it says aser asrenu. So this I didn't have time to look through the whole thing, but remember what we learned a few weeks ago, aser to aser, you give up to 20%. And Meiser, we said according to the Aruch HaShulchan, it's a separate mitzvah than tzedakah, and it's only a derabanan and this and that. So this sefer was talking about learning Meiser from. Do we learn Meiser from Yaakov, which wasn't a source that we saw, and then he has a different piece in this book also about that Avram gave Meiser. I guess I didn't read that one at all, but that was Malki Tzedek. That after the war with the kings, and then Malki Tzedek came out, so he gave him a meiser. So I mean, I thought that that we know that that's it's ambiguous. He gave him a meiser. Who gave who a meiser? Did some say that Avram gave the meiser to Malki Tzedek, because it says Malki Tzedek was a Kohen Lekel Elyon, a Kohen to the God on high. Some say that Tamar, who married Yehuda, was either his son or was his daughter or a descendant of his. Obviously, Avram was also a descendant of Shem ben Noach, but he called him Malki Tzedek. It doesn't say that he was Shem. According to the Medrash, it was Shem. But this Malki Tzedek, or did Malki Tzedek come out to give Avram a meiser? So we're not sure, but this sefer was talking about, do we learn a meiser from Avram? So I'm just mentioning because a couple of weeks ago we were talking about tzedakah and aser to aser, so it's possibly related to this week's parsha.
But some people said Malki Tzedek and Shem were the same.
That's what I said, right?
Oh, okay.
But Avram himself was a descendant of Shem.
Yeah.
But right, yeah. So yes, so I mentioned that, yeah. So the problem with this situation is, says Rashi, so if it said in the ksuva that the male sons will inherit the value of your ksuva, so if there's extra money beyond the 2 ksuvas, so let's say each ksuva was $100,000, let's just say, and let's say that he had $220,000, so he had more than enough to pay the ksuva, So then the balance, the difference that was Pat when he finished doing Ksuva, they can split that as a regular Yerusha, regular inheritance. But if not, if the value of his estate is not enough to pay for both Ksuvas, what happens? It says Cholkim b'shavel minun gugulosov. They split it equally according to the number of heads. Because in a place where this ksuva would uproot the diraisa law of nachala, the chachamim didn't make a takana that you'd have to pay out the ksuva. So if you remember back, I think on Daf Yud Beis or Yud, we had a Tosfos that seemed to say that ksuva is a diraisa, but there's other gemaras that seem to say ksuva is only midrabanan. So this Rashi is certainly saying ksuva is only midrabanan. So the rabbanan wouldn't have said that the male sons would get the thing if it would take up all the money of their estate, and then there couldn't be any Yerusha, because Yerusha is a diraisa. So the Chachamim didn't want to make a situation where the diraisa halacha of Nachla wouldn't take place. So Rashi is saying like the majority opinion that Ksuva is D'Rabbanan. I think Rav Aaron explained that certain amounts and stuff, that's all D'Rabbanan. But the fact that you have certain obligations towards your wife, that's a D'Oraisa. Because the Rambam already says in Sefer Mitzvos that it's a mitzvah to get married with Chuppah and Ksuva. And if Ksuva is only D'Rabbanan, how could it be a part of the 613 mitzvahs? The Rambam says clearly he doesn't count any D'Rabbanans. So some of the ideas of Ksuva are D'Oraisa, and some of the details are D'Rabbanan. So Rashi is saying here, so if the so this statement that just like the sons only get from Karka, the daughters only get fed from Karka. So he's saying just like it was it's a condition of the Ksuva that the sons will only collect from the real estate and not from everything. So too the Tanai that the Chachamim said that the daughters have to get fed, that only comes from the real estate of his estate and not from movable property that he owned. So the Chachamim only made the takana in regard to the real estate of the husband / father's property.
They said that there are some workarounds about that.
Well, so if you're talking about Yerusha, so that's something else. So I think what's it called? Rabbi Kraft spoke about that here last year, or whenever it was. The CRC had a based in Shabbos, but that was that daughters would get a nachla also. But that's not talking about. Let's assume that either there was no ksuva that had to be paid, or there's money beyond the ksuva. And also those cases, well, I would probably the majority of the cases are also where there's no children left. They're all adults. But that's a different detail. That's a way that halachically a daughter would get a portion. But that's not what we're talking about here. That's more of a recent innovation to try to give daughters an equal portion. Oh, but the other thing though is that there is a halacha that if someone says a statement that's not clear, they shouldn't get smicha. So why Rav Hamnuna made an unclear statement to begin with? He should have been more careful. We all have to. I mean, we have to be careful when we teach things. We have to say things in a clear way. And he said something that everyone misunderstood, and because it really didn't make sense. So Rav Yosef explained it because the only way it would make sense if he's talking about a specific detail of Ksuva, not the whole of Yerusha, and not the whole Yerusha. So Rav Yosef is right, and Rav Hamnuna praised him for understanding what he meant. But we do have a there it seems from a Gemara in like around Vav or something, or Hey, maybe in Sanhedrin, that if someone had, let's say, an accent and people were misunderstanding his words, and basically the halacha was becoming opposite from what he said. It seems that Shmai and Avtalion, who were the Rebbes of Hillel and Shammai, they were Gerim. It's about a big machlokas where they Gerim themselves or by the descendants of Gerim, but from different Mishnayos, they had an accent. And because of their accents, I forget if their aleph sounded like hey or their hays sounded like alephs, but and so they worded something in an unusual way so that people realized they were teaching something, so their accent shouldn't play a role. And then this Gemara in the beginning of Sanhedrin that I'm talking about, that egg whites, they with the word may beitzim or water that was used with eggs, it sounded like may bitzaim. So there was something with the accent, and because of that, people would treat certain things that should be tameh, they would treat as tahor. So they said you can't give him smicha because people are doing the wrong halacha based on what he said. But that it was more accent based, and this is just he said something in an unclear way. Rav Chia bar Yosef Rav Zon Mechite Dalia. So we're going to talk about more halachas here about feeding daughters from an estate. Rav Chia bar Yosef said Rav fed the daughters from chitim of aliyah. So what's aliyah? So Rashi says that these orphan girls came and said, "Can our father, can you feed us from our father's estate?" He didn't have property, but he had wheat. So meaning he had movable stuff, not real estate. And Rav did feed them from this. So which is against the statement that Rav Hamnuna just gave. Rav Hamnuna says the daughters only get fed from karka, and here we're seeing Rav fed them from wheat, not movable properties. Iboilahu, so they asked, Parnasa Havya. So when we talk about giving stuff for the girls, there's two possibilities. One, it's just like their board. We say room and board, so it's their food, or was it certain stuff to be given in their dowry when they would get married? So was this only parnasa, that was stuff to be given in their dowry, umay aliyah? And when it said the word aliyah was me'iluya the av uchadishmuel, it doesn't mean from what we would estimate the father would have given according to Shmuel's teaching from the Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel said the parnasa shamin ba'av. If it's for, I mean, parnasa we usually mean is parnasa. We usually talk about a person's salary to support himself for his that. But in this case, this parnasa, as Rashi says, means money that you're giving her for her dowry. So for each girl, it depends on what her father's, because her father's dead now, so he can't decide. But the Beis Din says, based on what we know about the father, he would have given this type of dowry. Odilma mazone mamish hava, or maybe did this case where these girls were asking and Rav gave them wheat, were they literally asking for food? Umay aliyah, and what does aliyah mean? Midvarim tovim shenemru ba'aliyah, from the good things that were said in an upper place. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef ba'aliyah hiskinu shebenos nizonos min tatlin, because in an upper place, the Chachamim made a takana that the daughters even get fed from movable property. So even though we said that Rav Hamnuna said that the Chachamim, Rav Hamnuna would probably have been, so Rav Hamnuna had to be earlier than Rav. So there must have been some type of later takana that the daughters would get fed from from metaltalin money also. I read somewhere once or twice that because there's a lot of takanos that they made a takana in aliyah. So did it happen to be that they tended to learn in high places or in upper rooms if a building had or was it certain places they had to learn? There was anti-Torah laws on the books, and they had to kind of hide, so they were learning in attics and things like that. And some say wherever they learned, it elevated it and made it, and they called it an aliyah because the place was elevated by them, by the chachamim learning and paskening in there, it became an aliyah. So whether it's literally an aliyah or figuratively aliyah, there's I don't think anyone talks about in regard to this, but it's in general because we see a lot of places about they were in an aliyah learning. So did they always learn in high places? What was going on? They were in Denver. They were in a high place. No, but it doesn't know. But it seems to be that there wasn't that they were in even the Tiberia. Well, Tiberia is low because it's the lake is there. So I assume that's around sea level. But not so far. Tzvas and stuff that's higher up. Actually, I wonder elevation. At the shore of the Kinneret Tiberia is about 689 feet below sea level. 210 meters below sea level. It's one of the lowest lying cities in its size in the world. So Tiberia is actually below sea level, but there's a lot of mountains nearby. So when they were in Tzipori, it's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, I think, for health reasons, or in Tzipori. I think that's also a higher place. But it doesn't mean they're in a place in mountains, so they called it Aliyah, but it seems they're in an upper level of a building. So the question is, so when Rav gave them this money from the metalton, what was it? Was it dowry, which which doesn't conflict with Rav Hamnuna's statement, or did he give them literally food to eat, or he sold the wheat to give them money to buy other food, or he fed them from the wheat itself? He used metalton to feed them. So which was it? Tashma. Let's learn from the following brisa teaching. Bidei Rabbi Banai Achroi de Rabbi Chia bar Abba, in the hands of Rabbi Banai, the brother of Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Have matatu diasme. He was the he was in charge of certain metalton that belonged to orphans. Also claimed to Shmuel. So the daughters of that man came to Shmuel, Amarle Zilzun. So Shmuel told them, go and feed them, even though it's from this movable property that he was holding on to. So my love, Mizone, when he said Zun, let's try to say that Zun comes with Mizonos. It was literally to feed them. So and he was holik Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef. Who we just learned that there was a takana that the daughters from their can get fed from their late father's estate from the movable property. So that's what we tried to bring a proof that this was literally to give them regular food, not dowry. So the Gemara says, "Lo hasan leparnas havai." No, that was for their dowry. Ushmuel tameh, and Shmuel paskin according to his own reason. Damar Shmuel leparnas shaman ba'av. Because Shmuel says, we just saw this a few lines up, Shmuel held that in regard to what we give a dowry, the Chachamim or the Dayanim would evaluate from based on what they knew about the father, what type of dowry he would have given. Have Uvda ben Arda, there was this a case in Harda, Vidun Dainig in Harda, and the judges in Harda ruled this way that they would get that the girls get fed from the metaltalin, the Pumbedisa, the Agve Rav Chana bar Bizna. And in Pumbedisa, it also happened to Rav Chana bar Bizna, collected or from the movable property to feed the girls. So I forget, because Rava was in Pumbedisa, and I think Shmuel. So I think Rav was in Pumbedisa and Shmuel was in Arda. I can never keep this straight, for it's not good, but yeah, Shmuel was in Arda. So the fact that in Naharda they pass like Shmuel, that makes sense. Naharda doesn't necessarily make sense because Rav and Shmuel argue about things a lot. That just because Shmuel held that way didn't mean that Rav held like that. But Amalu Rav Nachman said though to those judges, Zil Ahadru, you better retract your psak. The Art Scroll says that this was in Naharda. Which would make the article says it was for both cases. Renachman told both of them, retract your case. And if you don't, I'm going to collect from your own houses, because he's saying that they made a very basic mistake in passing, and when meaning if it's something that's so well known that I think it's called the Dvar Mishnah, basically, if the Dayana would make a mistake, normally they wouldn't be liable for passing wrong. But if it's something that was so fundamental, that's something that that the kids learn in school, then they would have to pay for their error in judgment. So Rav Nachman was holding that their mistake was so fundamental, he was going to collect from them to pay back for their wrong psak. Rav Ami, Rav Asi, several amazing mitatle. Rav Ami and Rav Asi, they felt that they should feed the girls from mitatlin of the late father, the estate. Amarlahu Rav Yaakov Bar Idi, but Rav Yaakov Bar Idi said to them, Milsa, the Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish lo avdu ba'uvda, something which Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish didn't do. Atun avdinan be'uvda, you're going to do something. So I really don't understand this Gemara so well, because it sounds so. Rav Yaakov Bar Idi is basically saying Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish didn't pass in that way, so you can't pass in that way. But the thing is, he doesn't say do we have a statement of Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish saying the opposite? He seems to be saying that we don't have any tradition that Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish pass in the way you're saying. Therefore, we don't know that that's halacha. Rabbi Kiva Eger, this is at the beginning of Yordea. I think it's in regard to, can a woman be a shochet? So some people feel that women can shach. There's a book that's quoted by the Rishonim. There was a man, I think was his name Eldad Hadani or something. He claimed that he was from the Shevet of Dan and he came from Africa and he went through Eretz Yisrael and this and that, and he wrote a book and he had some interesting psakim in there that no one else had paskin on these things. And I think he paskin that women can't shach because they'll faint at the sight of blood. Now we know that there's some women who faint at the sight of blood, and there's some women who don't, and there's some men who faint at the sight of blood, and some men who don't. But in Rav Yasha Ber, in the written shiurim that he published. He made it. It sounded like from there that a woman is allowed to shecht, but already in Europe, the shochet was kind of like a communal position, and there's a halacha that women don't get appointed to communal positions. So when we say a woman don't shecht, that means that they're not puzzle from shechting. If they shechted, it's kosher, but they can't be the town shochet. So I remember for Rabbi Kiva, for some reason I think the Rabbi Kiva is on this halacha. From the fact that we don't see that women shecht, is that a good enough reason to say that they can't shecht? So in halach we call it lo re'inu. The fact that we haven't seen this done, does that mean that it's not done because it's the wrong thing to do, or maybe it's the right thing? We just haven't seen it, but that's not enough. And Rabbi Kiva says, I think it's on this topic, but I might be wrong, is that just because we didn't see it, that's not enough of a reason to say that it's not okay. And yeah, okay. So if it's just that we don't know what Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish paskin, then I don't understand what this Gemara is saying. But it must be that there must have been some tradition that Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan didn't collect from the metalton to feed the daughters. Rabbi Lazar seven lemezim metalton. Rabbi Lazar felt also that he should feed the girls from the metalton of their late father's estate. Amar lefanav Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim, Rabbi Yodani Bach. Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim says, "My teacher, I know you. She'in midas hadin ata osa ela midas rachmanos. You're not doing this from the measure of justice, but you're doing it from the measure of mercy. Ela shema yiru hatalmidim v'yikva halach l'daros. But if you do this, the talmidim might think that you're doing it me'ikar adin, that they might think that this is the halacha, so therefore you have to be careful by doing it to know that it's not the halacha. So if you look in the art scroll in the middle of note 16, it says the law is nowadays pursuant to a subsequent Gaonic decree is that the daughter's substance may indeed be collected from movable property. But the Gaonim were after the time of the Gemara. So at the time of the Gemara, it seems the psak was not, but the Gaonim made a takana that the girls do get fed from their father's movable property. Haved also come to Rav Yosef. There was a certain girl who came in front of Rav Yosef. Amar lahu, meaning she needed food, and her father was dead. Amar lahu, he told them, Havulemi tamri dalbudia, give her from the dates that are on the mats. So Amar le Abaye. So it seems that when they would shake the trees to get the dates down, they put some type of mats underneath the trees, and they would shake it, and instead of hitting the ground, they would hit the mat so they wouldn't get ruined. So give her from these. Now that would be metaltalin, because they're already on the ground. They're not growing. They're not connected. So it seems that that Rav Yosef was saying that they would collect from metaltalin. Abaye says, Ilu balchov hava kihai gavna mi hava yosef leimar. If they were creditors, would we give them from dates that were already disconnected from the tree? No, the creditors only collect from real estate. This isn't real estate. Amarlahu, Amarle, Rabbi Yosef said to Abaye, the chazia lebudia kamina. I meant the dates that are ready to go on the mats, but they're still attached to the tree, therefore it's considered real estate. But then, so as we turn to Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, sof kol omed ligzos kegazuz dami. There's halacha, if it's about to be cut off, it's considered as if it's already cut off. Now, the word ligzos normally is from, well, Art Scroll here translates it as harvest. When I see that word ligzos, I think it's the word shearing sheep. But maybe in Aramaic, that's the word for harvest. I don't know. Because in Hebrew, it's kotzer. The malach of Shabbos is kotzer. But if it's ready to be picked, it's as if it's already picked. So even if it's still literally on the tree, but it's harvest time and we're about to harvest it, it's already considered as if it's separated from the tree. So it's not real estate anymore, even if it's literally connected to the tree. So the tzricha ledikla kamina. So Rav Yosef says he means that these are dates that still need to be on the tree for a while. So it's not that close to harvest time. So even though he called it the dates on the mat, he really didn't mean the dates on the mat. So since they're not ready to be harvested, they're considered real estate. Havu Yasov Yisoma Dasu Kamei. The Rava, there was a certain I guess there were siblings, but it doesn't necessarily say that there was an orphan boy and an orphan girl who came in front of Rava. Amarlahu Rava. So they needed food. Rava said to them, Halul Yisoma Bishvil Yisoma. So they said to the person who is holding the movables from the estate, give extra money to the Yasom for his sister also. So it seemed that she didn't get, but he was able to give more they were able to pay more to the brother and feed the sister through the brother. Amr Rabban and Rava, but the Rabban said to Rava, but you yourself said that the daughters could only get fed from the real estate and not from the movables from their father's estate. Whether it's for food, whether it's for the ksuva, or whether it's for a dowry. So how come here are you saying that she should get fed through the movables through the brother? Amrlahu. So Rava said to them, the Chachamim, the Rabbanan, ilu bratza shivcha l'sham shomi lo yavinan lei. If he would want a shivcha to serve him, wouldn't we give him money to hire a shivcha? Kol sheken hacha ti'ika tarti. So too here that there's two reasons. So I think they quote the Meiri that says that that the sister would serve as the person who would and I guess make the bed, cook his food, whatever. So instead of paying someone else to do that job and then they would get food because they worked for him, it would be his sister to do it in a way so she would be able to get food, even though halachically the estate wasn't obligated to give her food. Tanarbana, we learned in the Brayso, property that you have responsibility, meaning real estate, and property that there is no responsibility, meaning you can't put it in a loan document that you could collect from movable property. We take from the metaltalin to feed a wife and the daughters. Divrei Rabbi, this is the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi, what? Rabbi Shimon Elazar, Omer. Rabbi Shimon Elazar says, "Nechasim sheish lemacharas mitzin lebanus min abanim." We from real estate we take for the daughters from the sons. Meaning, if the sons have real estate, we take some of that real estate away from them to feed the daughters. Lebanos min abanos, and if there's older daughters have property and the younger daughters are hungry, we take some of the property, the real estate, from the older daughters to feed the younger daughters. V'labanim min abanim, or we take real estate from the older sons to feed the younger sons. V'labanim min abanos b'nechasim rubanim, and if the father had a really big estate, we will even take to feed the boys from daughters who had some of the real estate. But if there's only a little bit of the estate is a small estate, we won't collect from the daughters to feed to the boys. But movable property, we take from the older sons to feed the younger sons. Labanos min habanos, and we take from the older daughters to feed the younger daughters. Labanim min habanos, and we take from the son, and we give from the movable for sons if the daughters had some of it. Avalo labanos min habanim, but we don't take movables away from the sons to support the daughters. So basically, we see according to Rabbi Huda Nasi, the daughters would be fed from real estate. And Rabbi Shimon Elazar holds that they would not get fed from movable property. If I said Rabbi holds that they could be fed from movable property. Rabbi Shimon Elazar holds they're not. So the Gemara says, "Apagab the comment on halachic Rabbi Mechabero." Even though in general we pass like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi when he's arguing against one other Tana, halachic Rabbi Shimon Elazar. In this case, the halachas are Rabbi Shimon Elazar. The Amar Rava, because Rava said Hilchos the Mekarki v'Vlo Tatli. Because Rava says we collect from, we feed the girls from real estate, but not from movable property. Bein l'ksuva, bein l'mzono, bein l'parnasa, whether it's to pay off a ksuva, whether it's to give them food, or whether it's for their dowry. Okay, so we'll leave it here. Nun Aleph Amud Aleph here.